the GCSB bill. And the question is, who will keep an eye on how the GCSB uses its new power under this bill? The PM? Ian Fletcher? Eric Holder? Who? And what do they need all that new power for?
It is almost incomprehensible for me to imagine that New Zealand would pass legislation that reflects so much fear of some foreign force.
The right to act in secret, the right to spy on us, the right to share information about us, the right to carry guns and raid our homes, do so in ways the law intends.
I'm not in a position to draw comment on that at this point, but I'm not in a position to actually comment about who those individuals are. I'm not in a position to comment on that. I'm not in a position to comment. I'm just not in a position to go into this. I'm not in a position to comment about the individual. I'm just not in a position to speculate about that.
The controversial GCSB bill has passed into law by 61 votes to 59. The Green Party called it a sad day for New Zealand.
This bill condones the illegal invasion of the privacy of each and every person in New Zealand. This bill is not constitutional. It is not consistent with human rights.
Is the GCSB using, or does it have access to, X-key score?
Well, I'm not going to answer those
Why
questions
not?
because I don't go into, and no Prime Minister has ever gone into, what techniques they
So
actually
I'm taking
use.
that as a yes.
At the top of every page of the top secret document, 5 countries are listed: the USA, Australia, Canada, Great Britain, and, you guessed it, New Zealand.
There's something called the Five Eyes Alliance, which is an intelligence sharing agreement between the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, during the Second World War, the UK and the US were sharing intelligence about the Nazis. They had an agreement called Brusa, which allowed them to exchange personnel and gave both countries rules on handling classified information. And that agreement was working out so well for them that they carried it on after the war with the originally titled UK-USA agreement. In fact, the agreement was working out so well for the intelligence agencies that it expanded to include 3 parts of the Queen's Commonwealth: Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And there you have it. The Five Eyes Alliance was born. It was supposed to help with the sharing of intelligence on the Soviet Union and China, but it's not always been used for that. The Five Eyes set up a system called Echelon. It's what's called a signals intelligence sharing system. Now, in a nutshell, Echelon was a project to share wiretap phone conversations, satellite information, and eventually fibre optic communications. It's rumoured that the project dates back to 1971, although obviously it would have been developing as new technologies do. In fact, nobody's 100% sure who it even targets or how often, because it's so highly classified. In fact, when politicians started asking about it in 1999, the UK and the US both denied that it existed, and they still do today, even though Australia and New Zealand have admitted it does. And it's now thought to be an automated global spying network capable of listening in to every single phone call or reading every email around the world. We've known that this system exists since at least the year 2000, but there was a BBC documentary by a guy called Duncan Campbell that came out in 1987, and it was brought up then. Now, he had a source inside this site in Memworth Hill in North Yorkshire. His work revealed it to be part of the Echelon system. The weird spherical structures are known as radomes, and that's where the snooping happens. And back then they were capable of making 2 million intercepts every single hour. They looked out for keywords and message patterns trying to uncover terrorist plots or cross-border crimes, and any communications flagged would be passed on to intelligence analysts. That base was linked to the headquarters of the US National Security Agency and GCHQ, and it wasn't the only base. The Five Eyes Alliance had listening posts all over the world. Now, even in 1999, when these politicians were asking their questions, there were concerns that the power these listening posts gave the intelligence agencies could be quite easily abused, maybe by spying on individuals or giving information to certain companies so that they could have an advantage when they were bidding for contracts. Even back then, there were accusations that the NSA and its allies were operating a dragnet system and invading the privacy of American citizens. Now that sounds familiar, right? Because of Edward Snowden's whistleblowing, we've all become aware of the NSA's PRISM and perhaps to a lesser extent GCHQ's Tempora program. Both of them allowed the agencies to store and analyse vast amounts of data, metadata, emails and so on. The UK's Foreign Secretary William Hague has refused to comment on whether or not the information collected by those programmes was shared, and the same goes for GCHQ. Then a spokeswoman for the NSA said this: "Any allegation that NSA relies on its foreign partners to circumvent US law is absolutely false. NSA does not ask its foreign partners to undertake any intelligence activity that the US government would be legally prohibited from undertaking itself." But if all of our intelligence agencies are collecting this information anyway, does the NSA really need to ask for it? What the Five Eyes Alliance and Echelon show us is that for a long time our governments have been able to collect this information and that they have the legal basis to share it.
Well, we know from the leaks from Edward Snowden that the US government is basically committing mass surveillance on the world population. Everything that traverses through their networks is being captured. Every email, every phone call, every chat message, every SMS of every New Zealander and everybody else. Here's the thing, you cannot preemptively turn every person into a suspect and go and snoop in their personal lives. And you know, you might think you have done nothing wrong and you have nothing to fear. But if someone really has something against you politically, they don't like you, they will look through 5 years of your emails and they will find something.
Over the past several months, leaders of countries all over the world have been discussing inexcusable spy networks and communication interception laws. 8 months ago, New Zealand was rated #1 in the world for its freedom, which was fought for by Prime Minister David Lang in 1984 when the US was pressuring New Zealand into allowing nuclear-powered ships to enter New Zealand waters. As a result of your country's bravery to refuse United States demands, the US government suspended the ANZUS Treaty, which froze United States and New Zealand economic relations. It was this brave stand that has given your country true independence and moral high ground. Why should your government give in to such a power like the United States now? What has changed? The leaders of your country are being manipulated and corrupted. Do you really want your leaders to take after a country which is carrying out illegal and immoral practices, a government which tortures and orders drone strikes upon innocent civilians, a country which is carrying out mass surveillance on every single person in the world, including their allies? We as Anonymous are disappointed with the actions of your government. The passing of the controversial GCSB Amendment Act was a clear indication to us that we needed to intervene. On Thursday the 22nd, Operation Fuck GCSB was initiated, and on Friday we disabled the GCSB website for most of the day. This was downplayed by the media due to more deception from a GCSB employee. Following the pass of the GCSB Amendment Act, it was made public the U.S. military had an interest to build a new undersea cable from New Zealand to the United States that would allow greater amounts of data to be transferred between the NSA and GCSB as well as other paramilitary regimes. In the wake of recent privacy violations, one can only assume it is to continue such operations more efficiently and more effectively. Police affidavits related to the raid on Kim.com's mansion appear to show that New Zealand police and spy agencies are able to tap directly into United States surveillance systems such as PRISM to capture email and other traffic. PRISM, a tool used by the NSA to collect private electronic data of users from services like Gmail, Facebook, Outlook, and others, gained international significance this year after classified presentation slides detailing aspects of the program were leaked by a former NSA contractor. The U.S. government has insisted that the NSA is only permitted to collect intelligence on non-U.S. citizens overseas, but critics of the program say that the government's broad classified collection efforts capture too much incidental data belonging to innocent Americans. At the top of every page in the top secret XKey score documents, 5 countries are listed: USA, Australia, Canada, Great Britain, and New Zealand. The scope of the data mining operations is far-reaching and ever-growing, and it is clear that New Zealand is more involved with mass surveillance than anyone thought.
From the United States, Mr. Eric Holder.
This was the 15th of July 2011. On the far left, our Attorney General Chris Finlayson, and beside him Eric Holder himself. Also there, Australia, Britain and Canada, completing the so-called Five Eyes partnership. His security detail looked to and fro, checking their guns. So who receives such intense security in New Zealand? Well, his name is Eric Holder, and he's head of the US Department of Justice.
The Department of Justice under Eric Holder is out of control.
There are a number of consequential threats to the United States that I have to deal with. And we identify those that are serious threats, and we monitor them, disrupt them, and to the extent we can, ultimately destroy them.
Ultimately destroy them.
To the government of New Zealand, you have our full attention, and we are watching your every move. Violating the people's right to privacy will not be tolerated. To the citizens of New Zealand, due to the inevitable corruption of your government, we have decided to broaden the scope of our NZ operations. During the next week, Operation Kiwi Freedom will come into full effect. Your right to freedom and privacy shall not be suppressed because of pressure from the United States government. You live in a democratic country, and we as Anonymous will do everything in our power to remind your government that they do not control their citizens, that they are not in charge of our rights to freedom as human beings, that the people should not be afraid of their government, the government should be afraid of its people. We must stand together and unite against these violations. This struggle is not yours alone, but for the whole of mankind. It is time for the citizens of the world to unite in one voice. Stand up to the oppressors and defend your rights any way you can. As long as there is one of us standing, we are legion. Do not give up your rights, do not turn away from the fight. They will try to vilify us in our quest for justice. Do not believe the propaganda. Research for yourself. Seek the truth. Operation Kiwi Freedom. Initiated. We are Anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. New Zealand government. You should have expected us.